This is a podcast about new crops. You're going to love it. Join us on The Cutting Edge, a podcast in search of new crops for Wisconsin.
We're not trying to develop Kernza as a niche market crop. We're trying to develop Kernza as a major crop that in the future would, substantially transform the landscapes.
Welcome, everyone, to The Cutting Edge, a podcast in search of new crops for Wisconsin. I'm one of today's co-hosts, Jason Fischbach, the agriculture agent up in Ashland and Bayfield County, and joined today by Carl Dooley.
Yes,
Hi,
Carl Dooley. I'm ag agent in Buffalo County, and it's great to be on once again, Jason. A little different topic today than what we've been on.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about Kernza. This is a crop long in the making, and it's something that really has potential to transform our agricultural landscape. And we've got two great guests today to talk about it. Colin Cureton at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul, and Valentin Picasso, who's at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
So let's just start with some introductions. Who you are, a little bit of background, and how you're involved with Kernza right now. Colin, you want to go first?
My name is Colin Cureton, and I work as a supply chain development specialist with the University of Minnesota's Forever Green initiative as part of the commercialization team of Forever Green. And I'm essentially the supply side guy of that equation. So I work on siting of new production acreage and supply chain development for the new crops and cropping systems we're developing, all of which are oriented toward perennials and winter annual crops that offer new economic opportunities and new environmental benefits.
Valentin.
I'm Valentin Picasso. I'm an assistant professor in the agronomy department in CALS in the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I work mainly with forages and perennials and perennial grain systems and adaptation to climate change and how we can make more resilient cropping systems. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Great. So let's just get right into it. The Kernza name, or Kernza, what is it? It's, I know it's intermediate wheatgrass, but tell me the background of Kernza, how it developed, what's being done to develop it, and why Kernza?
Kernza is the first perennial grain crop in the world. It is a perennial grass that can be harvested for grain like wheat or barley. So with the grain of Kernza, you can make flour and bread and pasta, and you can also ferment it and make beer. But at the same time, it's a forage crop, so you can harvest forage at the same time as harvesting the grain. And it's perennial. That means it grows year after year, and once you plant it, you can harvest it for many years without the need of replanting, and therefore has a lot of environmental benefits in terms of soil health, reduction of soil erosion, and cleaning water in our landscapes.
So is Kernza an actual strain of intermediate wheatgrass that's been with a plant patent, or is that a more generic branding for, intermediate wheatgrass in general?
So Kernza is actually the grain harvested from intermediate wheatgrass that has been improved and bred for increased seed size and grain size. So Kernza is a trade name of the grain of this improved intermediate wheatgrass. There's so in a way we use the name Kernza for the harvest of the crop. Right now there has been new varieties. I mean the first variety of Kernza really released has been from the University of Minnesota. It's called Kernza Clearwater. That's the name of the variety. But Kernza is a more general name for the crop and for the grain harvested out of this crop.
And Jason, I'll try to follow up on that. Kernza is a trademark name that's owned by the Land Institute, which is based in Salina, Kansas. And that trademark name is also associated with an identity preserve program, which essentially ensures that grain that is grown, handled, and sold within that supply chain meets those identity preserve standards, so that you essentially know you're getting that high quality product that delivers those environmental services, and growers can have some confidence in that chain. And so it's similar to other trademark name grains like kamut, that maybe you've heard of. That's a niche or artisan grain that offers some distinct health or environmental benefits. So everyone that is growing Kernza is licensed to do so by the Land Institute as the owners of that trade name, to ensure that they are aligned with the vision for Kernza and also the standards, so that we don't have someone out there growing intermediate wheatgrass, unimproved variety, selling it as Kernza to try and get that premium that is really based around those ecosystem services, right? For a large part, as well as a new artisan grain variety has some value in the marketplace, and we can get into that later. But just wanted to clarify that the grain is associated with that trademark name and that identity preserve program.
Maybe just
Gotcha.
one more step in the Kernza and the development, or where it's from. Where is the intermediate wheatgrass originally from? Is it a native to the United States? Is it from the Fertile Crescent, like it seems so many of our grains are? Or
intermediate wheatgrass is a species that originated in the Balkan area in Eurasia. And it was introduced from Europe to the US early 1900s as a forage grass for mainly for the West and for rangelands. And so it's not a native grass from here. It started being domesticated as a perennial grain crop about I think it was like in the early 1980s or so by the Brodel Institute, and then they did a first round of selection. Then they sent the material to the Land Institute, and at the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas, they started a more intentional breeding program. And it's been already, I mean, the Kernza that we're growing now, it's been through 5 cycles of selection, and then it also the material went to other places like the University of Minnesota, who started a big major program on breeding of Kernza too, and now they released the first variety.
So how is adoption shaking out across the states, given that there's so many, the Kansas is involved, Minnesota's involved, Wisconsin's involved. Sometimes I hear there are some frictions across state lines. Is this developing cohesively? Is there, how is this playing out?
that's a loaded question there, Jason.
Yeah. What kind of friction? People driving their combines to the state line and going head to head, or
the things I've heard.
Yeah. No, I would actually say a couple things. First of all, we're still very, very early in this whole Kernza affair, and Valentin has been researching this a lot longer than I've been working on it. So I'd love his perspective on the sort of arc of development. But we at the University of Minnesota released the very first official Kernza variety in August of 2019, right? So imagine like the first soybean crop released variety, right? This is a long road we're going to walk. That being said, we're seeing a lot of interest, right? So whenever, especially in this climate, there's new crop opportunity that either real or perceived is attached to a new market opportunity, you have some people that want to be first to go. You have a lot of people that don't want to miss the boat, right? So I think one of our main challenges is right-sizing expectations among growers, that many think this is ready to go. We have mass quantities of seed available, and we really don't. We went through our first year of commercial seed increase, so we have more seed than we've ever had before. But we can get into that later. But the first year we released about 5,000 pounds of seed. It was enough to add like 500 acres total. This year we have enough seed to maybe add 1,000 to 2,000 acres total. Grand scheme of things, that's pretty small, but in Kernza world, right now there's only 2,000 acres of Kernza worldwide. So we're at relatively speaking, we're at an inflection point where we may add 50 to 100% of commercially oriented acres. And that's the last thing I'll say, is that a lot of acres up until now have been this sort of either pure research or hybrid research commercial. And now we're kind of transitioning to growers that really see this as a commercial production opportunity, and are really just in the early phases of that. Valentin, do you have anything you want to add about this kind of long arc that we're on?
Yeah, well, as Colin was saying, this has, to me, it's very unique, not only in the type of crop that it is, because it's perennial and a grain crop, but really because of the collaboration and the synergy between different universities and research institutes. I mean, we really work as a community together. We meet every year. We discuss, the challenges and the new research, and it's a really growing field of research, both in the area of production and agronomy and environmental services, but also in the area of marketing and supply chain and farmer involvement. So it's been really motivating to me and really exciting to be part of this community across states, across and also international. There's a lot of interest in Europe, in South America, in the development of Kernza. Now, having said that, it's also unique, I think, as a model, in the sense that we're not trying to convince everybody to grow Kernza right now. We're trying to grow at the same time the knowledge and the farmer base and the marketing and the demand. So we're trying to grow at the same time the supply and demand, and that's what the role of Colin and all the other people involved. It's because we don't want a lot of farmers trying something that we really don't know very well how to manage, and then get stuck with a market that it's not working. Or we don't want like companies expecting a lot of grain when then it doesn't come. So we've been doing a very, I think, unique effort of growing these two sides together. There's a lot of demand for Kernza from the industry, and there's a lot of interest from the farmers. And our role is to try to make that process of growing across the states in a sustainable manner, really.
It seems to me this is, we've done one of our podcasts on hemp, and it seems like the contrast here is pretty stark, right? Hemp was, let's face it, kind of a free-for-all, versus it sounds like with Kernza, it's much more intentional, much more strategic to build both the, to align the cart and the horse, align the markets and align the production, and recognizing too the strengths and weaknesses of Kernza and the limitations still that are there, I think, in terms of the agronomics and learning curve for growers, that kind of thing. But
and if you think about this, we're really having this strategy because we're here for the long term. We're not trying to develop Kernza as a niche market crop. We're trying to develop Kernza as a major crop that in the future would substantially transform the landscapes. Okay, so we want this to grow in a slow and sustainable manner. So we're really hoping that in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's difficult to say when, but this would be another major crop like corn or soybeans or wheat or barley. Okay, we're not going for a small niche market, and that's why when we asked the farmers, we did a little bit of research to ask why are farmers growing Kernza, the few farmers who are growing Kernza right now, and we have a lot of farmers that the motivation is environmental and environmental consciousness, and they want to protect their soil and they want to provide ecosystem services and all that. But we also have a lot of farmers that are large farmers that are interested in the profit, that are interested in the economic opportunity of this, and we really want this to be a major crop that it's both good for the environment and good for the farmers and for the economy.
I also wanted to just kind of contextualize here that this is what we think of as the leading edge of a portfolio of new crops, new perennials and winter annuals, that, as Valentin said, within Forever Green Initiative, we are trying to move forward in the long history of the land-grant university system of offering new crop opportunities that meet the challenge of the day. And now we're stepping into the next century, really thinking about these environmental challenges and also the sort of economic hollowing out of rural America. So how do we address both of those at the same time? We have to offer new economic opportunities that are also attached to new crops that have these benefits for soil, climate, water, etc.
So to the point that the vision for this is not as a niche crop, right? Valentin, you're talking about. So you've got some pretty big commercial partners on board. Patagonia Provisions, General Mills. Can you talk more about those partnerships and what their vision is for this crop and why they're involved?
Whether it's General Mills or anyone else, I think they have made public and strong commitments around sustainability and climate change, for example. And I think a lot of the industry partners we talk to in our commercialization team, we talk to regularly, they are looking for solutions that will help them meet those goals, right? And so when new crops emerge that have the potential to both deliver an economic return, but also advance that ecosystem service aspect, I think they're very excited to support and also see a role in basic research development and contribution. So I know that our work at the University of Minnesota would not be where it is, and probably at the Land Institute as well, wouldn't be where it is without the commitment and support of General Mills.
We are extremely thankful and proud of the small businesses that are local and that are really trying and experimenting and selling Kernza products. We also have here in Madison, Madison Sourdough as a bakery that has tried products with Kernza and you can sometimes buy Kernza bread there. We have Driftless Brewery in the Driftless region in southwest Wisconsin, producing Kernza beer. And there's a lot of small partners, and we're very proud of them and very thankful of them. At the same time, we're very proud to be partnering with large companies like General Mills or Patagonia into developing this for the long term. So,
as we know, in the specialty crop or alternative crops world, we have this funding dilemma where, I refer to it as the flywheel of agriculture, in that our big main crops, corn, soybeans, cows, command a lot of research dollars. The state legislature puts a lot of money into their publicly funded universities to support those crops, and for good reason. Those are well-established big crops that a lot of people depend on. And yet we have some challenges with those crops, and we also have other opportunities out there with different emerging crop species and things. And yet without an industry going to the legislature or to the university and saying, hey, we want you to work on Kernza, we want you to work on hemp, hazelnuts, hops, whatever, then the public sector can't really respond and provide funding for that stuff. And so that flywheel, it's so hard to siphon off even a little bit of resources to fund and do the development work on these new crops. So I'm fascinated how Kernza, because it seems like it's fairly well supported, well funded. Can you just talk briefly about how you did this? How Kernza's been able to find the funding to get it as far as it has, and what it sees going forward?
Yeah, well, what I'd say, Jason, is again to contextualize that Kernza for us here in Minnesota, University of Minnesota, is on that leading edge of this larger portfolio of crops with under the umbrella of the Forever Green Initiative that has been able to, I think, so far fairly successfully put forward a new vision of agricultural diversification and delivery of new crop opportunities with those economic and environmental benefits. And Kernza is on the leading edge of that, and that program is based here at the University of Minnesota, multidisciplinary approach that spans breeding, agronomy, environmental sciences, food science, and now commercialization and implementation. And so we've been able to go to the legislature, I think now for several rounds, and been able to, through a multi-sector partnership that included growers, that included industry, that included consumers, that included environmental advocates, water quality advocates, and academics, all working on this together, have been able to go forward and make that ask. I also know that given the scale of what we're trying to do, like if you think about the development of other basic commodity crops over the years, it takes significant and sustained funding. So I would say when we look at the investment has been fantastic, but we know it's going to take so much more. And last comment is that we're starting to turn the corner on having some escalating funding from the state here in Minnesota has gotten some of these crops to the point where we've been able to garner significant federal investment just in the last year or so through, multi-state NEFA grants, USDA investments, not just on, I'm thinking across the portfolio. So in hazelnuts, with the SCREE program, and with winter annual oilseeds, pennycress and winter camelina, also kind of turned a corner with getting their first major significant federal funding. And so that's really where we're headed, is this diversified portfolio of private, philanthropic, local, state, and federal funding is going to need to be flowing in simultaneously in a sustained and increasing manner to really get the landscape scale impact we want to have.
Colin, the Forever Green Initiative, that's a grant program, or not, well, I mean, no, the initiative's bigger, but the funding from the legislature, that's a grant program that's only eligible to a certain suite of crops. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so my understanding, I'm just a very small part of Forever Green. There's 80 researchers at the University of Minnesota and beyond in these cross-sector teams, cross-departmental teams, and also cross-sector, that most of that funding historically has been for the research side. So they've appropriated escalating certain number of millions. I could look up the figure.
Potentially up to 10 million this fiscal
Yes,
year, right?
I think our ask the last few years has been in the 10 million range. I think last year was in the 4 or 5 million range. I should know that number. I'll look it up before this interview is over. But last year, the first allocation was made in the amount of $500,000 to be spent over 5 years on implementation. And we're focusing that first round of implementation funding on the commercial scale up and success of MN Clearwater, our first Kernza variety. But we're already seeing a need to come behind that with implementation resources for crops like winter camelina, which is a winter annual oilseed that can fit into our existing agricultural landscape and really enhance it through the addition of a winter oilseed. So, just sharing that the state's appropriations have now been several legislative cycles running in escalating amounts and have started to bridge into the implementation space, which is quite exciting.
Got it. Valentin, anything like the Forever Green Initiative in Wisconsin? What's the support like for your work?
So one thing I wanted to add to this story about the funding really is you were asking, how was it possible to secure so much funding for Kernza, which we all know it's not enough, of course. And I think we have to have a historical perspective here. The Land Institute started 40 years ago with a clear vision of believing that we can have an agriculture system that doesn't destroy the environment or the economy, and realizing that the current agricultural system has a lot of problems in terms of environmental degradation, but also social and economic limitations for farmers and consumers. And they started with this vision of how we can develop an alternative, and an alternative that has two features. One is we need more perennials. We need more perennial cover in order to give environmental services. But at the same time, we need diversification. We cannot have one or two crops dominating the landscape for economic and environmental reasons. And so there were a lot of crops that were tested, and there are a lot of crops that are being developed. Kernza is just one out of many. There's perennial sunflower, there's perennial sorghum, there's perennial rice, there's legumes that are also being considered. So there's a suite of different crops that have been tried over the past. Some of them didn't work and were not included anymore in the research program. And there are others that are earlier in the development, and in the future we will be able to have other more perennial crops. And as part of that vision, there was the consistent talking to donors and funders and trying to convince, to put money on this over 40 years really. And that allowed for programs like the Fellows program, where graduate students from different universities, you were one of them, I was one of them, were trained into this new alternative way of developing new crops and diversification of agriculture. And now all that people are in research positions, faculty positions, extension positions, and trying to develop this research and applying to grants in, I've been very fortunate to get funding from NIFA, from USDA, from SARE, from really funding programs that are funding agriculture in general, really to develop this, okay? And so I guess I wanted to point out here, there's no magic bullet. Kernza is not the solution to all the problems. It's just one piece of a much larger puzzle, and a very long-term puzzle that really is trying to, transform agriculture in a way that it's good for the environment, good for the people, good for the farmers, good for society, and really has been a long-term investment. But also now, as Colin was saying, state agencies, federal agencies, and that are really funding this, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that helps. Just to push a little bit on the Wisconsin's contribution, has the state taken an interest, at the legislative level or legislature?
So there has been interest. We haven't got to the point of like Minnesota in terms of actual commitment for the long term of funding, but there's been a lot of interest from the Department of Agriculture and Trade and Consumer Protection. There's been a lot of interest from NRCS, and we're working closely with NRCS to include the Kernza as another crop that can be supported by some of NRCS programs like EQIP. So there is interest and there is support. We haven't got to the point of like commitment of funding, but I think we're getting there. We're working towards that.
Great. Awesome, guys. So let's talk agronomics. Colin, you mentioned this briefly. So, and Carl, jump in because I'm asking too many questions, but you mentioned this briefly. I'm a grower. I'm interested. How do I get seed? How do I get started?
Yeah. So we have a system set up where there's a very simple online application, 2020 Kernza Growers application, where you share your basic information, acreage you'd like to plant, and we've got a number of checks in there, like, do you have small grains planting and harvest equipment? Do you have post-harvest storage? What's your experience selling into food grade markets? We've set a certain range of priorities and requirements for Kernza growers that we, in partnership with the Land Institute, go through each of those applications and usually call each grower directly and engage with them one-on-one, talk about their interest in Kernza. This is a perennial grain crop, so we want to make sure that people will be committed with this limited amount of seed to produce a stand for multiple years. Most are, but also, like last year, for example, we had a lot of people come forward that said, hey, I have, 6 prevent plant acres here and 4 there and 20 over there. I'll throw Kernza in. It'll be a good option, right? And our sense is that that's probably not the best way to commercialize a brand new crop. So we got to make sure that our first wave of growers are really going to maximize the likelihood of success for the new crop, and that's the whole purpose of the vetting approach. Chances are, though, when growers have gone through that whole process, if they're really committed to this crop and they think they're a good fit, we are excited to see people, give it a try and to support them to do that. And so there aren't many rejections coming out of that process, but it's just a process so that we don't, not a knock to hemp by any means, but I'm not sure we want to become the Wild West like hemp has in many ways. So you fill out the 2020 Kernza Grower application. Chances are myself and or someone at the Land Institute will have a conversation with you directly. Then we would, approve your request. You would get licensed concurrently, pretty efficiently, can do it online for the Kernza trademark program and also for the Kernza, the MN Clearwater variety through the University of Minnesota. And then we are now working with a contracted seed distribution partner that cleaned all of our seed last year, Minnesota Native Landscapes. They're based in Foley. And once a sale is executed, we would, send over a note to Minnesota Native Landscapes that, they're set to pick up their certain quantity of seed. And then the last thing there to mention is that, that conversation phase earlier is important to make sure, growers, we talk through with growers their row spacing, their, things like that determine how much seed they're going to need to buy, what's their acreage, what's their row spacing. And also we're drawing from a number of different seed lots that have different germination rates, for example, all of which inform how much seed you're going to need to buy. So we're not at a point yet where you just go online and order your amount of seed. There's a bit of a process to it, but basically it's apply, talk to us, get approved, get licensed, buy seed.
Now, does the same process if I'm from Wisconsin? Do I go through Valentin, or do I just go to the Kernza website, or doesn't it matter?
It doesn't matter at the moment. We do have, I should say, it doesn't matter the application process, but we do for the University of Minnesota's variety. We have a preference to, we're essentially holding space for Minnesota growers based on, our state funding, for example, has, required that we deliver these new crop opportunities to Minnesota growers first and foremost. That said, we don't want to hog all the seed. We got to share the wealth, but we do want to make sure that we're not developing new crops and sending all the seed elsewhere. So we sort of have a preference for Minnesota growers, but we'll take applications from anywhere, and that has actually been one of the things that might encourage us to say either no or just not yet is, we're getting requests from Alberta, from all over Europe, from the Dakotas, from Montana, and we just don't have enough seed to supply the commercial acreage that some of those guys say, I want to plant 500 acres of Kernza. Right now, I think the largest commercial Kernza field I know of is like 140 acres, and most are under 100. So this is not a crop at scale yet. It's not really, we're at a much smaller scale. We also have an acreage minimum of 20 acres. We find that if you're growing less than 20 acres of a row crop, like a grain crop, chances are it's not going to be necessarily a priority for you. It might kind of be at the, it might be at the bottom of the priorities list. And then also the costs tend to escalate as you try to move a 6-acre plot of Kernza, and you got to ship it around 3 times and process it. And the processing and supply chain costs relative to the volume really makes it less of a economically viable opportunity. So that gets into all these supply chain logistics and costs, which is all at play here.
So and is the market only organic, or is the market both conventional and organic? Or
well, right now, production-wise, organic management practices are required. Not certified organic. It's just that we don't have any labeled herbicides or pesticides yet. Those variety trials are underway. So right now, certified organic is not required. We do see the market trending a bit organic, but we also know there's people waiting in the wings to get in the game until they feel like there's, as they say, more tools in their tool belt.
So spring seeded, fall seeded, what's recommended for following crops? Can you follow small grains in the fall? Should you be following a legume to give it a nitrogen bump? What's recommended right now for the seeding?
So think about Kernza as in terms of a grain, it's similar to winter wheat. So it has to go through a winter before it can flower and produce seed. And therefore we recommend planting in the fall and let it go through the first winter, and you'll get a better establishment, and then you can harvest the next summer. In the upper Midwest, in terms of planting dates, we recommend, mid to end of August and early September at the latest. Okay. So it has to come after a crop that you can harvest before that. So you could plant Kernza after a small grain, oats or barley or wheat. Or we could plant Kernza after maybe an alfalfa field that's 3-4 years old, or the soybean or the or the corn. Usually, you have to harvest much later, so you might have to go through a cover crop and then plant it the next year. You can plant Kernza in the spring. It is possible. You can plant it. The thing is, because for the establishment during that first year, if you plant it in the spring, it would be like a grass without producing any seed, and so it's not very competitive with the weeds during that spring. And that's why when you plant it in the fall, it would be much more competitive the next spring with the wheat. So we've had much more success with fall establishments of Kernza.
Is winter hardiness an issue in the upper Midwest? Can I grow it in northern Wisconsin?
Yeah, it can grow in northern Wisconsin. Winter hardy has not been an issue so far. I mean, it's a cool season grass, tolerates very well the cold, and also tolerates quite well the drought. It was one of the questions originally we had, is like, we knew intermediate wheatgrass did very well in the West where it's drier, and we didn't know how it would do in more humid climates like here, but it's been working pretty well. I mean, we both in Minnesota and Wisconsin, we have been growing this for 5 or 10 years, and we have good success in terms of the soils and the climate.
Valentin, you mentioned maybe following small grains, oats or barley. Are we concerned about any of the same disease issues though with the small grain crops?
Potentially it could be, but intermediate wheatgrass and Kernza are very diverse in terms of the genes, and they have resistant to all the diseases that we know. And actually, intermediate wheatgrass has been used in the past as a source of resistant genes to other crops like wheat and so far we haven't seen any disease problems with intermediate wheatgrass. That doesn't mean that in the future, when the crop is more expanded and there's more area, there might come. So far, the only disease we've seen is ergot, usually in the borders of the fields, but it hasn't been a big issue. Of course, just like wheat, DON is something that we need to measure and control for the marketing. But so far, it hasn't been a big issue. Colin, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I would encourage everyone to not, as Valentin said, to not necessarily think of Kernza as like a magic bullet or a super crop. We did see some issues with DON or vomitoxin last year that had a couple lots kicked out of the food grade system, or they essentially didn't meet spec. But I think that was not an uncommon occurrence for a lot of small grains. It was really, really rough year on the whole wheat crop as well. So it does involve some risks, and for Kernza growers, they'll like other small grains trying to reach food grade markets. That's why we have that requirement or strong preference for either on-farm post-harvest storage or a local post-harvest storage solution, because you'll need to store that crop, dry it down, send in samples. We are working to develop a good system to do that, so that they can test for vomitoxin, aflatoxin, et cetera, and then hold that crop until it needs to move. So we saw a bit of an issue there last year, but not unlike, I think, any other small grain.
Okay, so we've got the crop established in the fall. What do we do about nitrogen? Fall applications, spring? Can we underseed it in the spring, like frost seeding with clover or something? What's recommended for feeding it?
Absolutely. So the first thing we have to consider is Kernza is a dual-use crop. Okay, you want to harvest the grain and you want to harvest and utilize the forage, because it does produce a lot of forage. Okay, so when you're thinking about how to manage this crop, you need to be thinking, how do I maximize grain and at the same time forage and forage quality, right? So the research we've done, basically the management that we're recommending right now, based on the, again, only a few years of research on agronomic management. Okay, we don't have like 20 years or 100 years of information like in other crops, right? Is you establish in the fall. We have been doing split applications of spring nitrogen and fall nitrogen. We don't know what's the optimal timing really in terms of whether split applications or just fall or just spring. We are doing research on that, but so far we have good success with applying like 40 pounds of nitrogen in the spring and another 40 in the fall, more or less. It doesn't require a lot of nitrogen compared to other crops. And of course, it depends on your soil type and location and what was the previous crop and all sorts of things. But in general, it requires little amount of nitrogen. We would, if we do this, the spring nitrogen application would be at green up in the spring. Then you let it grow during the spring and summer. And by the end of July or early August, you're harvesting the grain. For harvesting the grain, you can either combine directly, like you would do for grass seed or for grain. There's the combine. You just need to tweak the settings of the combine to be able to harvest the seed. It's a lighter seed compared to other grains, but it's not very different from grass seed. So there's equipment to do that. And then we normally, right after harvesting the grain, which, the crop gets like 5 feet tall. So when you harvest the grain, the first 2 feet, then you still have like 3 feet of forage available. And so we normally bale that forage, which has a quality of a little bit better than wheat straw. I mean, it's still green, but it's very high fiber. So we've done feeding trials with that. You can use it for bedding in dairy systems. You can feed it to cattle, and we've whether heifers or beef cows, for instance. We have done trials where 50% of the diet is Kernza straw and the other 50% is haylage, and they gain weight and without a problem. So it can be fed to animals. And then after that, in the fall, it regrows. We do a fall nitrogen application and let it go. We can either graze it in the fall or harvest another forage harvest at the end of the fall. And that's really high quality forage. And then the next year it continues again. I mean, in spring, you can harvest forage in the spring, early in the spring, in the second year. And then let it go to seed, harvest the grain, harvest forage. So when you think about which farmers are ideal for growing Kernza, well, you want somebody, a farmer who knows how to grow grain and can utilize forage or can sell the forage to a neighbor. So because the forage is an important part of this crop.
Valentin, you said that it was still green, that bottom 3 feet. So the crop is still green when you're harvesting the grain. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how do you tell when to harvest?
Well, it's tricky because it's not only, I mean, part of it's green, part of it's going to be really mature, and part of it's already going to be shattering. Okay, so you have to find that happy medium there. The breeders, one of the main goals right now, other than increasing grain yield, it's also reducing shattering, so that it's not such a problem. But normally, I mean, you would want at least 50% of the seed heads turning brownish color, and you can do the thumb test to see if the grain is filled. But it's risky. And we haven't figured exactly, and we don't have the information exactly what's the optimal timing for harvesting. I mean, again, all these are research questions that researchers are targeting, and we're looking into. But that's why I'm saying, I mean, usually end of July, early August, when kind of half of the field it's turning brownish. That's when you would harvest. There will still be green leaves on the bottom, so you have to be brave to run your combine onto that, but it works. Yeah.
How perennial is it? Do we expect this to go 2, 3, 4 years? What about so 2 questions. And what happens with all of our other C3 grasses? Does brome and quack and everything, Timothy, start to move in? Is that what'll end it as a crop stand, or is the crop just kind of burn itself out like alfalfa eventually?
So in terms of the intermediate wheatgrass as a grass, and Kernza is no different, it can survive for 20 years, 30 years. I mean, we've seen thick stands of intermediate wheatgrass that don't thin out. Okay, so the crop itself, it's very perennial. Okay, but the plant itself, it's very perennial. Now the grain production of that stand, our experience is that it goes down in the second and third and maybe fourth year. So we've seen that the yield of grain really declines, from the first year to the second, to the third. And we think that that's not because the plants die, but actually because of overcrowding of plants. Okay, there's too many tillers, too many plants, and so there's very little resources put into the reproduction and a lot into vegetative growth. So one of the main research questions we have right now is how to thin those stands and how to continue the production over time of the grain. So right now, I mean, the information we have is, well, you can establish Kernza, harvest grain 2 years, 3 years, and maybe after that you can use it as a pasture, or you can turn it into your rotation and go back to some other crops. But again, we've only have long-term information for only 5 years, really. And so, more research is needed to figure out whether there's some kind of rejuvenation that we can do, and we've tried different things. We've tried burning the stands like prairie grasses, or we've tried tillage or herbicide applications to thin the stand, and we're really looking into those experiments right now. I mean, we don't have a clear recommendation, but we think that the stand can be rejuvenated and we can maintain yields in the future. But that's why we still insist this is a dual use crop. You want to use the grain and you want to use the forage, because there might be years that you just harvest only forage, and that's fine, and you manage in a different way, and other years that you harvest mostly grain.
Any progress on finding a companion crop for intercropping? A legume in there or something?
So you asked about the intercropping with legumes. We've tried alfalfa. It works pretty well as a companion legume for Kernza. We've tried red clover. Here in Wisconsin, red clover, it's very competitive, and at the rates that we've tried it ends up dominating the stand in the second, third year. Cura clover, same thing. I mean, they're good legumes that can be mixed with Kernza. They all have some penalty on the grain yield, about like 10, 15, 20% of reduction in grain yield, but certainly an increase in forage production and forage quality. So there's a trade-off there. When you have the Kernza monoculture, you get like 20% more grain. When you have the Kernza with the alfalfa or the Kernza with the red clover, you have less grain, but you have much more forage and much better forage quality.
And what kind of grain yields are we starting out at? You're talking about a deduction by maybe 20% if we put a companion crop with, or it goes down over years. What is our optimum, and then what can we expect?
Yeah, so in terms of research yields, what we've seen is like around 800 to 1,000 pounds per acre in the experimental stations in the first year, and then going down maybe half of that in the second year, and maybe like 200, 300 in the third year. On farmers' fields, Colin, maybe you fill in there, but I think it's around between 300 and 500 pounds to the acre.
Yeah, I can share some more numbers here. So in our 2019 harvest of this improved variety in Clearwater, we had an average yield of in production fields of about 500 pounds per acre. We saw a range of anywhere from 350 to up toward 800, and that 800 pounds per acre was a certified organic field, so it wasn't due to any particular amendment or conventional treatment. and I wanted to chime in here on the economics of all this. So I'm an economist by training, not an agronomist. So you don't want your agronomic advice from me, but I've tried to develop some supply chain budgets and crop enterprise budgets to put some numbers to all this and sort of the economic benefits of growing Kernza. Because I'm sure if any listeners listening and hears something like a 500 pounds per acre or something, you kind of, your eyes glaze over or something like that. But I want to put in context the value of this grain relative to other grains and how it's seen in the marketplace as a differentiated product offering these ecosystem services. So on the way at the end of the supply chain, on the retail end, we've seen conventional grains sell for anywhere from $3 to $5 per pound. Right. So when you think of like a bushel of wheat, at the farm gate sells for like $4 a bushel. We're talking about this grain as, $4 a pound. So that just puts in context this trade-off between like the value of the grain versus the yield is an important consideration. Certified organic grain, we've seen retail from anywhere from $5 a pound to $7 a pound. You can go now online to Sprout Labs or Perennial Pantry. Sprout Labs it was selling wholesale for a while, and you can look at their pricing on there for certified organic and non-certified organic. And you can also go on to Perennial Pantry and purchase, advanced purchase. There will be selling grain and flour, and they're looking at 14-ounce bags for around $9.50 a pound. So kind of like, like a Bob's Red Mill, niche or artisan grain. Pretty comparable. Now on the grower economic side, okay, in looking at the production costs, we usually see about a year one production costs of $300 to $350 per acre in the crop enterprise budget. This being a perennial, those production costs usually drop by about a third in years 2 and 3. So you already have a pretty manageable production cost on a per acre basis that then, declines by a third in years 2 and 3. Valentin's comment about the importance of dual use is very much true. So we see growers that are, if you're just managing for grain only, you have the potential to make a profit. There's also a lot of risk involved in relying the whole affair on just that grain harvest. So if you're growing for grain only, we think you can, break even or better. But your revenue potential is significantly improved if you're taking the forage. The research shows that there's just a lot of biomass out there of, average or higher than average quality. So with, I think I'm seeing here, Valentin, correct me if I'm wrong, about 3 tons of straw per acre per year, given your kind of standard forage prices, you have the potential to just, cover your cost of production on forage alone. And then you get a grain crop on top of that, and it's gravy, and it's a premium grain product, right? So we've seen people, break even, or some people have, their stands have failed, they haven't made it to market. We've also seen people who have, netted $1,000 an acre, if they had that real high. Now, don't everybody go out and plant Kernza, but that's for a high yielding certified organic grain crop with a good negotiated price, I stood on the side of a certified organic grain truck last summer that had 13,000 pounds taken straight out of the field that was destined for a specialty grain buyer that was, willing to pay for it. And it was a high quality product that met spec, and that grower negotiated a good price. So there's a lot of components there other than just producing the grain. You got to be marketing your product. It has to be high quality, certified organic plot, but that's the range, right? So anybody who's interested in the economics of this, it's kind of hard to go through right now remotely, but I have an integrated supply chain budget that lays out all the costs in the system, not just production costs, but all of those processing steps, the transportation, with variable assumptions for grain yields, forage pricing, grain pricing. You can plug and play and look at what your revenue scenario might be.
If at some point, right, a couple dollars or $4-5 a pound, that's still pricing when it's a specialty niche crop. But if we're talking millions of acres of Kernza and we're supplying nationally branded food products through General Mills, right, and now we're in the dollars per bushel range, I would assume, something like that. So I've read that the Kernza has about a fifth the production of wheat, for example. Is there, is there enough room within the intermediate wheatgrass genome to get yields higher, or is this going to be a model that's always going to depend on the forage crop once you get to scale to have a market for that crop?
In terms of the breeding, we haven't seen any slowing down of the breeding progress over the time, and so when you compare with the first cycle of selection, the grain yield has gone, I think, tripled already, and it's continued to grow. So we expect that in 10 years, maybe the grain yields would be, double what they are now, or even higher. So it's hard to say, but we envision that in the long term, the yield of this perennial grain crop would be much higher compared to what it is right now. That's one thing. Now, I think that forage would still be an important part, and that's actually good. I think the systems that integrate grain and livestock are more sustainable in general, and so the ability to utilize the forage biomass, it's going to continue to be important, I think. Not that maybe it won't be needed for the profitability, maybe, I don't know, but it would certainly be important for also the ecosystem services and the environment and so on.
I'll amend that too, and that's to say, Jason, your question about kind of pricing over time. And I think as efficiencies and scale increase, it might be reasonable to see prices come down a bit, but the idea is that also yields are gaining on that. But I want to go out on a limb here a little bit and say that I think we need to be careful about making this another race to the bottom commodity. And we're working with a lot of growers on what the best way to do that might be. And it might be, the economic model of a Kernza growers cooperative that can really manage supply with demand. I think one of the challenges is, even if you successfully commercialize a new crop, the history of agriculture is such that we get on the supply treadmill, overproduce, prices crash, and then growers are back in the same position. So what do we do to maintain value for the grower, deliver, economic sustainability, not just these ecosystem services that the public is going to benefit from?
A little bit of a step back, though. Let's talk about this seed itself. First of all, there's a lot of interest in gluten. Is Kernza gluten-free? Second of all, does it have to be dehulled before you can do anything with it? Or because there's a lot of interest, I think, in some of these new crops, regenerative crops, however we want to state it, in the small bakery, the home bakery, the specialty crop idea. And does Kernza fit into that, or do you have to have lots of infrastructure, a dehuller, et cetera, to make this work on in your system?
Yeah, so Kernza is lower gluten, but not no gluten, higher protein grain, which is of interest to a lot of people. It does require, at the time being, requires dehulling, making a rapid increase in free threshing, in the rate of free threshing grain. So I think right now we're somewhere around like 50 to 60% free threshing with these varieties coming out, and I think pretty rapidly progressing toward what we could call a free threshing grain. There's also people working on malting Kernza, such that I think you might see breeding programs go in a direction where, for some niche uses, you might want to see that hull stay on. And in others, you might want to see that hull, come off in the harvest process. So it does require a bit of processing now, which is why we're trying to do that thoughtfully and carefully, in this kind of cluster model, which I haven't talked much about at all. But there are a lot of costs involved. And just to reemphasize, very early days in this whole affair. So
I would like to make a plug for a couple of resources that are online. One is the website kernza.org, where you can learn more about the story of this crop, but also connect with the Kernza network. Which are the growers? Where are they located? Which are the different partners, research and commercialization and industries that are working with Kernza. So for farmers and for consumers and for businesses who are interested, there's a lot of information there. I also want to mention there's and the website of the Land Institute, you can access all the videos of the Kernza conference 2020, which happened like a month ago. And so there's presentations on research and agronomics, on breeding and commercialization. There's presentation from farmers who are growing Kernza right now. So it's a really good resource to learn more for people interested in this topic.
Is there a grower association or something forming, or growers cooperative or whatever?
Yeah, so right now we're co-facilitating with a couple of grower leaders the potential development of a growers cooperative. There's also in development more, I would say, based or being driven by the Land Institute, but also in partnership with all of us, a Kernza Business Association. So we're starting to see the development of these sorts of entities that, like for any other major crop, would have a growers association, that there may be cooperatives within that or underneath that. So we actually have our next grower cooperative and marketing call this week. So we're having those regularly. And so I think we now have what you could start to call a critical mass of growers that recognize they need to have an organized marketing strategy to bring the grain to market. And I wanted to also, along Valentin's lines, plug a few resources here that we have access to, that anybody who wants to get in touch with me. We have a Google Drive folder with resources for growers, which includes the Grower's Guide, includes the seeding rate table, includes all of the notes and recorded calls we've had with growers up until now. There's probably 10 to 20 hours of grower calls on there with distilled notes, and a number of other resources, recorded presentations, slide decks, agronomic best practices, things of that nature. Anybody who wants to get in touch with me can do so at CURE0012, Cure0012 at umn.edu.
I just want to say to both you, congratulations. I know you're both kind of standing on, and we all are, shoulders of those that came before us on these projects, but man, you guys are rocking it. You guys are doing such great work, and it's so fun to see, to me, the essence of public institutions and research being on, pardon the pun here, but the cutting edge, and trying to develop new strategies and new crops and new options for growers. It's just awesome. So thanks so much for your time. Carl, any last question?
Oh, once again, thank you. I look forward to seeing, I know this year field days are probably not going to be happening, but look forward to taking a look at the crops again. Look forward to more releases. I know you have Clearwater. I'm assuming there's others in the pipeline, and be excited to put some of those in some of our plots and take a look at them.
Yeah, well, I wanted to thank you guys for covering this, branching out beyond the H's to look at Kernza. Thanks for having us on. And there will actually be it's up in the air whether it will be a virtual or in-person field day out in Madison, Minnesota, out in western Minnesota at the A-Frame Farm in July. I don't have the date right in front of me, but I think that's being hosted in partnership with Moses. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, thanks again for covering this today. And I feel like there's so much more we could have talked about. There's a whole cluster development strategy here in Minnesota. We're investing in 3 different regions, but maybe we can save that for the next conversation.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here with you, and thank you for the invitation, and looking forward to more discussions on this and other topics.
Brought to you by the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension.